Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Subtext Podcast Archives. These are the long-lost episodes of the Subtext that were originally produced between 2015 and 2017. In 2018, the Subtext moved to American Theater Magazine, and we've been producing the pod there monthly ever since. These time capsules are being shared here in their entirety, including plenty of outdated references and advertisements for events far in the past. If you enjoy them, please subscribe to the current podcast feed for the Subtext or stream new episodes on the website for American Theater Magazine. Thank you for listening.
I remember the first time I felt inspired by another person. I mean that sort of palpable sense of inspiration that borderlines on jealousy. But Johanna was an alien. I couldn't be jealous of her because I could never imagine being her or having her talent or her sensibility. She was a weirdo in the most endearing way, and I was a teenager drawn to people who knew how to express themselves. I loved her. I've always struggled talking about Johanna because she died at a time I was incapable of communicating with other people. We became very close in that way teenagers become close, where they stay up late talking on the phone about nothing for hours with long moments of silence because neither of you want to hang up because you feel so connected. If you hang up, that connection could be lost forever. Johanna was an actor, the first true actor I ever knew. I mean, this is who she was down into the marrow of her bones. It was in her blood. I had plenty of friends who acted in school plays, but Johanna considered acting to be an art. She couldn't wait to get out of high school and start her life on the stage. She never talked about being famous or moving to Hollywood and being in the movies. She talked about being on stage. I remember once she told me that she got cast as Helen Keller in a production of The Miracle Worker. I wish I could have seen that. But I went away to college. She went away to private school. Letters were written from time to time because email wasn't a thing yet. But I started to drift. Phone calls became less frequent. For reasons I still don't understand, I stopped keeping in touch. After a while, so much time had passed that I didn't know how to reconnect, how to say, "Sorry, I disappeared on you." When I found out she was sick, I became paralyzed with fear and sadness and guilt. I was too young and immature to do anything, say hi, tell her I was thinking about her, that I loved her. Not much time passed between me hearing about her sickness and when she died. I was hundreds of miles away and used that as an excuse to not be there for her. Acting was in her blood, but her blood failed her, and I always felt like I did as well. Johanna was in my mind the first time I acted in a play, and she was in my mind when I stopped acting in plays. And now when I write plays, I often think about what she would be like performing as my characters. I think I'll write a play for her.
Welcome to the Subtext. I am the host, Brian James Polak. I appreciate you downloading or streaming this episode. If you like what we're doing, please check out our archives at thisstage.la or on iTunes. And if you go to iTunes, please give us a rating and leave a comment. It's been a month since our last comment, and I'm starting to feel a little inadequate. This month's episode is sponsored by the Wallace Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts. Forget Trump versus Clinton. The real drama is on stage at the Wallace in The City of Conversation, directed by Michael Wilson and starring Christine Lottie, Jason Ritter, and Georgia King. The City of Conversation is a searing political drama about politics and families and politics. The New York Times calls The City of Conversation a juicy, funny, and terrific new play, and the Washington Post hails it as exhilarating. Performances begin May 17th through June 4th. For tickets and information, visit thewallace.org. Today I'll be speaking with Larissa FastHorse, an award-winning playwright, director, choreographer, and performer based in Santa Monica. Her play, Urban Res, produced by Cornerstone Theater Company, just closed, and if you missed it, you missed something extraordinary.
Imagine living and working in some kind of train convenience in this city.
Weird? I know. We'll see.
It's fantastic.
I don't believe it will really happen.
I think what intimidates me with the train here, which doesn't intimidate me in other cities, is changing lines.
Yeah.
Because I'm very confused by it. Like, I feel like you're in Los Angeles, you're supposed to pay a new fee every time you go to a different...
insane.
And I just can't comprehend that.
Yeah.
And I get really confused because usually you're in New York or you're in Boston or Chicago, you're getting on the train, you're hustling out of that stop and you're changing trains, so you're just like hustling to the next one. Right. But there's this extra step of having to buy a new ticket.
Yeah, which makes no sense at all.
Yeah. I think if they want their... I'm sure they've heard this from plenty of people, but Metro, if you're listening, yes. I'm demanding.
It's so stupid.
Yeah.
It's like you're already on the train.
I know, and they're always like fighting for writers on this as they're expanding now. But it's exciting. When does it open in Santa Monica?
Well, it was the 20th or 21st of May, but now I just heard someone say June. I mean, it was opening, 2013 is when it was supposed to open. So.
Yeah, so they're right on schedule 3 years later.
It's like, they just keep pushing back. I know Santa Monica is having like their big city festival on May 21st, the train fest.
Right, opening the train. Everybody has to take a bus there.
Yeah, exactly. Santa Monica, they'll have massive bike valet, which is the thing they do in Santa Monica.
Do you bike?
I do, actually, yeah. I bus and bike now to get downtown to Cornerstone. So
so you're not taking the train yet?
No.
How far is the train from you if you wanted to like bike to it?
It's just literally like 1 mile.
Like the one that's open right now?
Oh, the one that's open? No. If I want to take the train,
it's
I have to
many
go,
stops away.
Over to Culver City, which I'm not that much of a biker.
Yeah.
The mile
is totally
I can
fine.
do. So I do that to the bus now. I take the freeway bus. That's how I get downtown, which is awesome. So,
I think I was just thinking a couple other interviews like this, we've spent time talking about Los Angeles traffic and whatnot, and I feel like I want to create a segment
about
it's like playwrights
trying to get around LA.
Yeah.
I know.
Because that's super interesting.
It is, right? It's really what I would tune in to listen to.
I'm moderately bummed that we're not doing this in time to help promote Urban Res, but I am very excited that we're talking after I've been able to see it.
Yeah.
So I could talk about it. I could talk about my experience and ask you more questions about it because I found it to be such a fascinating work, and I found it really interesting to have been part of one of the readings, a couple months ago, to sort of experience the play on the page at a table,
right,
and then see it sort of like blown up into a production.
Exploded is the word I was going to use, but yeah, same idea.
Yeah, and you sort of laid that out to all those of us who were sitting around the table that day. You're like, it's not really like this,
right?
But this will give you an idea of the story. But anyway, can you give us a little context about Urban Res?
Yeah, so Urban Res was a commission from Cornerstone Theater Company as part of their Hunger Cycle. They do their plays, for those that don't know, if there's somebody that doesn't, they do their plays in cycles. So I think it's a 9-play cycle this time, I want to say. I'm not sure. Over several years. And so this one was engaging with the indigenous community from and in the Los Angeles basin. And then so we do story circles for ended up being 3 years. And we took a break in there, but their schedule got changed around a bit. And so we did story circles through that time with the community, and then they're very clear you're not doing docudrama. You are writing a playwright-driven process play, but it is entirely informed from the community. And so that's what
So did Cornerstone approach you, or did you pitch to them?
No, they approached me. They actually asked me to write a completely different play. The ensemble chooses the topics in the series, and they choose the artists they want to work with. And so they came to me originally to do the community gardens play, and we were going to be in 4 different community gardens around LA doing a little play, which is what is now sounds really nice. After the insanity we went through to make Urban Res. But Sigrid Gilmer's play ended up, Seed, A Word Act of Faith, ended up covering that in her discoveries with the community she's working with. She found this amazing community garden kind of movement that was happening in Watts, and so she ended up putting that in her play. So then they came to me to find something else, and I came up with Hunger for Culture. Actually, my husband came up with the phrase, but then I came up with the idea.
And so urban res is not in any form a traditional play.
Yes.
How do you describe it?
We call it we still don't know. Michael and I will still disagree. Michael Junger says, the director, and I will still disagree on what it is. I call it an immersive theatrical experience. He says it's not immersive. Some people call it interactive. I'm like, well, no, it's not really interactive, except in the first 20 minutes when you first come in, it is interactive, but then it's not. And then it turns into a very, by the end, a very linear experience for a while. And then, it's like, it's everything. I constantly was joking with Michael that, like, you've only missed, like, in all your theatrical forms we put into this, you've missed, like, mime and...
Right.
Can't remember. Oh, and comedia. We don't have comedia.
I felt
we've got everything else.
I feel like, the joke is that... I heard the joke and I've repeated it as if I thought of it myself. But that talking about how 3D technology exists for movies now, but it was always around with theater.
Right.
Theater's like the original 3D. But what I found with urban res was that our experience of the play was three-dimensional, whereas normally it's not. Our experience is sort of one-dimensional, but what we're watching is three-dimensional. But the two 3D experiences came together.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. Yeah, and it was really, this is a dream I've had had a vision to do a piece like this, not this piece, but a piece in this format since I started writing 10 years ago. So to finally get to do it has been incredible. And to have a partner like Michael working with me on it who 100% trusted and got what was in my head from the beginning was essential. It couldn't have been made without him.
So did you bring the format of this play to the idea and then through the story circles find the content for the form?
Yeah, I did start with form, which is unusual for me. My plays tend to just kind of be whatever they're going to be. But yeah, I started with wanting to create this large cultural fair and this event that happens with you. Little thing I wrote about in the program is, we talk about it as immersive and interactive and all these different theatrical forms, but for me, it's actually indigenous. I'm just indigenizing, decolonizing theater, and having you see our forms of entertainment and education and interaction the way that we do them and the way we've been doing them for centuries.
So this style of experience has been around for a long time.
Different, I would say what I did is I borrowed from a lot of ancient ways of entertaining, I guess, and different theatrical forms, and then put them together into a contemporary, more Western, understandable version of all that, and put a bunch of things together, though, at once. Which, as you saw, and we even had... as you know, there was this community performance, and it was different every night. We never knew what it was going to be. One time it was a massive danza group with drums and children and all this stuff. Another time it's a storyteller all by themselves.
Oh, the dance with the dress.
Yeah. It was different every night.
There. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, and it's just community people that want to sign up and do something, and we just say, go, do something.
And it was like an intermission that wasn't an intermission in a way. It sort of functioned as like a break point.
Exactly, and that's how we structured it within the show. Is that it is our intermission. It gives everyone a second to.
I remember
breathe.
when I came to Cornerstone that one day and read the script and we sort of followed every storyline. So I got to understand every single storyline because we're reading it, one at a time on the page, or as as it's all written out on the page. And you said. The experience of the production, you're going to sort of follow one or the other or bounce in and out of various ones. And I was incredibly skeptical of that. I was really thinking, there's no way I'm going to be able to follow any one thing.
Yeah.
And
you were not alone in your skepticism.
But it actually, and I don't know how, there's some kind of weird thing that happens. You just get it. You just understand these various stories. And even if you're getting like 5% of this one and 20% of that one, by the end, you can line up all the characters and say, I understand what their journey was, what that conflict was, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
It was fascinating.
Awesome. Yay. Glad to hear that.
And I remember finding myself so far away from the character who sort of like kicks off the story, who he is going to be arrested for selling his art unless he gets enough signatures. And I lost him. I lost him for virtually all of the performance. But he was sort of like the inciting incident of the play. And then I got him when he was back, when we were all centered around the whole group, and he comes back rolling in all of his signatures. And I get his entire story in, I don't know, 3 moments. And it all made sense. It was really amazing.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, it's interesting because I brought in a few, from time to time I'd bring in stuff to our Playwrights Union writers' workshops, and they'd be like, it seems like you're repeating things a lot. And I'm like, well, yeah. And that's the hard part is knowing, because people are going to jump in on these stories. There's so many things happening at once, and you might see, like you only saw Max's story at the beginning and the end. Some people will jump in the middle, and I have to give them some kind of context, but do it quickly. And it's funny because when writers are looking at the page, they're like, this isn't going to fly. I'm like, trust me, it's gotta be there, because you have to have some little quick moment of context to be able to jump in with them and take that journey each time when you're jumping in and out of stories. Or people, sometimes I noticed some people would they do what we did in rehearsal, which was stand in the middle and just like let all these stories just kind of wash over them. It was really interesting to watch people that did that, and they just kind of stand in the middle and pivot and listen when there's a couple times when there's 5 stories happening at once around them, and they just pivot, and I'd watch them listening to all of them. So it was like, okay, apparently they're getting enough from those kernels to put it all together.
I'm relatively introverted, and I don't like these kind of group settings. They kind of like give me anxiety. So that was another thing I was bringing to the table, and I was a little concerned that it would ruin my experience. So I was on the exterior constantly. I was sort of like rotating around the group every sort of point. I was never in the center.
Right.
And so I would always find myself in a corner when something was happening in that corner, but I'd be right there.
Right.
So there was a moment where there were the government official was all the way on the stage, and I was all the way next to the person who was yelling, the character who was yelling to him.
Right.
And that was amazing to me. That like I felt so fortunate to be standing in that particular spot because I really felt like the distance was what was so important. And the government official coming closer and closer and closer to this person, and the feeling of that, because he was really like wonderfully aggressive. It was Peter right?
Howard.
Peter Howard, who played the government
token
official.
white guy.
Yeah. He was so wonderfully aggressive without being off-putting. He was also really, really funny.
Yeah.
It was really so anybody coming in could have gone to this and had a different experience. There are, 50 different experiences you could have, or different sort of like you could have an intimate relationship with this story or that story, or a mix of all of them. What was the primary objective? Like, what is the thing that you wanted, that you were hopeful people would take away from it?
The thing about this play is it's interesting because, like, as you saw when it was written, the way we wrote it out for the readings, because we're taking it back to the community. Every draft of the play I take back to the community that contributed to it so that they can give feedback on every draft all the way through. I didn't have anything in there that wasn't okayed by the community. So because of that, we had to, as you saw, lay it out narratively, and which was then very confusing to everybody because they'd be like, this is never going to work. People are going to miss parts of the story. I'm like, yes, they are. And because to us, to myself and to Michael Garces, who was with me on this, the whole 3 years, the experience of it is equal to the text. So the experience of being in that space and having to see people face to face and being forced at times to interact with people and to talk to them and see them, having to move in groups together, being herded from one area to another, and very importantly, being upended and feeling lost and confused and not knowing what's going on, and like you don't know the rules, and you're suddenly, the land that you were comfortable on a couple minutes ago has suddenly become very foreign and difficult to maneuver. That is the essence of the entire experience for the indigenous people of this country. And then, by the end, I was warned, like, don't worry, we'll hug you in the end, which we do. But not knowing what's happening, not knowing what the rules are, feeling a lack of agency was incredibly important. And that's all, to me, that's why it had to be done in this way, because the physicality of what people went through, of skulking around the edges, of being in the middle, of not knowing where to go, being confused, being lost, that's what the indigenous people of this country have been through for centuries. And the form could not be separated from the script. Was in my head from the beginning, because the experience is what it is. The script is fantastic. I love the script. It's great. I love all the people and the stories that came through, but it can't, to me, be separated from the experience.
So when you're bringing elements back to the community, were there things that were objected to by people? Did they say that this is...
No, actually, that was the amazing thing. I'd been warned by everyone before I started this project that it couldn't be done, that because the indigenous people of this area, because of the ridiculous rules the federal government had put in place for them to be re-recognized as not extinct and to prove that they're not extinct, have several schisms in their community because of those rules that were implied on them. And so a lot of people told me, it's not going to work. They're not going to participate. They're going to be upset, blah, blah. And I was open with everybody. I said, I will talk to anyone who will talk to me. It's not my place to judge who is right and who's wrong. I'm just trying to tell a story that represents your experience. And the indigenous community was unbelievably supportive. I had not one negative experience at all with any of the people that I spoke with in the community, in the feedback, in the rehearsal, all of it, in the performance. I mean, we've had just an amazing, incredible experience, because we're talking about people who are literally declared extinct by the federal government. You cannot get more invisible than that. And to have their story told is an incredibly meaningful and moving experience for them.
So the Nicoleño...
Yeah, they don't exist anymore. The Nicoleño are extinct, which is why I chose them. There are words and titles that are used for the original people of the Los Angeles Basin, because, again, of the process the government is forcing them through. I chose not to use any of those words, because by choosing one makes it sound like I'm legitimizing one tribal name over another, and they're still sorting that out for themselves. So I chose to use a tribe that is extinct from San Nicolas Island, and the Nicoleños. The last of them were taken to Mission San Gabriel, and they did not have linguistic, even though they're supposed to be related to the people of this region, they actually were closer to the Miwok, the Coast Miwoks. A lot of what they found on their island is redwood and things from that area. So their language had morphed, and they couldn't even speak with the people in this area anymore, even though they're genetically and linguistically supposed to be tied. Mm-hmm. And so as far as we know, they all died out. I haven't been able to find anyone that can find one. Mm-hmm. The Russians had killed most of them off for sea otter pelts on their island. And so a Russian boat came through and devastated most of the island.
In what era?
Ooh, good question. I'm terrible at remembering dates. A while ago. Back in the olden times.
Before the internet?
Yes.
It's really before internet, after internet.
Exactly. And really, then, yeah, who cares?
I remember a couple years ago, I asked you to have coffee with me because I felt incapable of talking about this. I didn't have the language, and I still don't feel like I have the language. But one of the things I remember you telling me, which is obvious, but still really revealing in my own personal ignorance, and probably I'm representative of a lot of people in their ignorance, but that I think that we grow up in the public school system in America. We study the indigenous population barely. Like we just sort of like, we don't really cover the Trail of Tears. We don't really cover the atrocities of the past. And we also lump everybody, all the indigenous, into one. You're all Indians. Right. Everybody's an Indian. And one of the things you said to me was that that's not how we see each other.
Correct, yeah.
And I was like, obviously.
Yeah.
That is so dumb of me. I mean, like that.
Right.
Yeah. And so I was wondering if you bumped into that at all in the process of working on this play. Or do you bump into that? Because I think when we talked about it a couple years ago, you were talking about it in the context of working on another piece in the Carolinas, maybe, if I remember.
Yeah, North Carolina, yeah. Well, actually, yeah. And it's something we have to constantly guard against, especially myself, because I'm Lakota. And so the Lakota are the, because of many historical reasons, one of which we were the last free natives in this country, last ones to be put on a reservation. Therefore, we survived into the photographic time, into recordings, into different kind of pop culture literature that didn't, printing presses and all of that. So we survived into a time that captured us. And is really, I mean, yes, I think we're cool, but because I am one, but it's honestly just because we were still there. We were still there living in our ways until the very end of the 19th century. So we were able to be recorded in a way that so many other tribes hadn't been. Therefore, we have kind of, not only have we influenced American pop culture, but we've actually influenced a tremendous amount of tribal culture because it's the one thing that is recorded and written down. And so I, as a Lakota person, have to be incredibly careful through this whole process because I would, without even realizing it, be doing things from a Lakota point of view or I was like, oh, well, let's just use a hand drum. It's like, well, they didn't use hand drums here. They use clapper sticks and they use gourd rattles, but little things like that are just automatic in my head or talking about powwow. These aren't powwow people. This isn't what they do, and little things that just seem, and many of them are pan-Indian right now, and they've kind of been adopted as a national sort of symbol or default, and even with Native people, things have crossed over, the internet, right? So we've adopted different things, but we had to be constantly on guard against that and constantly saying, wait, are we making assumptions? Are we using the wrong tribal lens? And fortunately, we had our community members who are from this area that could constantly be saying, well, no one knows what that means, or that's not how we'd say that. That's not how we look at that topic or at that aspect of the world. We see it from a different point of view. And so we constantly had them to correct us and help us get back on track whenever we were wandering off into Great Plains land, which is easy to do for me. So, yeah. And I also made as part of that, too, I made a conscious decision. Like I said, Cornerstone really makes sure it's not a docudrama. It's a playwright-driven process. However, because the form was so huge and unusual and specific, I chose that I'd say at least 80% of what you heard is directly from community. 80% of the lines are directly out of all my notes, and I chose not to put my own words in there. I mean, obviously there was connectors I had to put in and jokes, things like that, but because there's a lot of, as you hear, it's a satire, so there's a lot of comedy.
Side note, a lot of comedy. Yeah. Like it's surprisingly funny. Yay!
Yeah, and that's what Native people are all like. Of course, that's the one thing. Like almost every single story circle I did over 3 years, they said it has to be funny because that's who we are. We're funny people, and no one sees us that way. No one portrays us that way.
That was so funny.
But so. Even and in a lot, most of the straight up jokes, like the MC character Xavier, his straight up jokes I just crowdsourced, and got off of social media and stuff. But the other stuff that I had to put in, I put in, but then all the rest is directly, literally word for word from our community members, and that was a conscious decision I made, which was hard at times because as you saw, it's really hard when you've got all these moving pieces and all these puzzle pieces, and you have to make them fit together. And I've put in my own constraint of not using my words, and that was incredibly challenging.
Right.
And Michael and I wanted to kill each other many times. Mutually together kill each other.
So talk about where you grew up.
I grew up in South Dakota. I'm enrolled on the Rosebud Sioux tribe, but we moved. I grew up primarily first in a border town, Winter, South Dakota, through kindergarten, and then my dad worked for the state, and we moved up to Pierre, South Dakota, which is 100 miles off the reservation, and that's where I went all the way through high school. And
over the years, have you maintained a connection, or how have you maintained a connection? I'm assuming here with the tribe back in South Dakota.
Yeah, it's interesting because so I was adopted, and so my adopted last name is Bear, which is actually German. It's B-A with an umlaut R. And so both of my parents are not Native American, my Hunka family, but they knew my FastHorse family. They knew all of them, had known them for a long time. And so it was an open adoption. Unfortunately, as we know, there's a lot of social issues on the reservations. There's a lot of trouble with drinking and drugs, and a lot of abuse, and a lot of issues that have kind of filtered down to us through being basically incarcerated for all these years on these reservations. So because of that, my Hunka parents, chose to, they wanted to make sure I was connected to my people, but it's now looking back, I had this amazingly perfectly curated procession of Indigenous people. Like my dad, every time he worked with someone or came in contact with someone through his job, which he worked with a lot of tribes, he would have them meet me, or I'd come to the office or have coffee or have dinner or something. And so I had this amazing procession of very successful Indigenous Lakota people that were Lakota and Dakota people that were brought into my life, and really made sure that I had something constantly negating the negative and the stereotypes that were around us. The enforcement of stereotypes are very strong in South Dakota. And so it was a very well curated Indigenous experience I had growing up, which was actually pretty awesome because I saw us in a different way than a lot of people growing up in South Dakota did.
How old were you when you were adopted?
I was 11 months when they got me, and then it took almost a year before the adoption went through.
And at what point were you aware?
I don't remember ever not knowing it. Adoption Day is like the big day. That's the one we celebrate every year.
Uh-huh.
Like birthday is nice, but Adoption
Right.
Day is special. So
What's your adoption day?
January 4th.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's the big one that we celebrate every year.
So your Hunka parents,
Mm-hmm.
your Hunka parents they proactively maintained a connection for you.
Yeah.
Since before you can even remember.
Yeah, no, I don't even. And then my biological father was in and out of my life as he was capable. He had drug and alcohol issues,
Mm-hmm.
and so when he was able, he was in and out for a while. But he had his own problems. So, yeah.
At one point, did you find your way into the arts?
Oh, early. I was really fortunate. The arts were always in our house. My parents are both. Neither of them did arts professionally, but as they both, played instruments and sang, and they chose to. Their outlet was in church, so they were both organists for church, and they both sang in choir. And Saturday afternoon, we always had the Metropolitan Opera on the radio because they'd always have operas on the radio. We always went to things. My dad was on the board of the community concert series, so the strange little bits of art you get in the middle of South Dakota, which is a strange, varied little group of folks, but we'd always go to those things, and they'd take us to stuff. We'd go to Minneapolis where my aunt lived, and go to things. So the arts were always in my life. Piano, you had to learn piano, and that was just a given in our world. I don't remember learning piano. It was always there and was always around. I can't play now to save my life, but things like that, music, and was always there. So I was not good at music. It wasn't something I excelled at, and that's what my parents really loved. And so I was very fortunate that I was put into ballet when I was in second grade as a form of physical therapy because I had problems with my legs. I had a metal brace on one leg and horrible orthopedic shoes until I was in sixth grade. And
you danced ballet through that?
Well, I was put into ballet as therapy to straighten my legs out because they were spiraling inward, and so it was to help fight that and turn them out. And so the Shriner Clinic came through town and said, oh, she should be in ballet and as therapy. And so they put me in second grade. I had to start with the little teeny baby people. I had to get out of school early so I could go with the babies and be in ballet. And that's where I found I could share my parents' love of music through ballet, through dance. And that's where that's what I did first as a professional ballet dancer.
And for how long?
jump in.
That's
That made it sound really easy. And then,
I had leg problems, and then I became a professional ballet
yes,
dancer.
from South Dakota. Yeah, I was really fortunate. I danced professionally for 10 years before injuries finally got to me. So yeah.
But how did you get from this injured child taking ballet just for physical therapy into becoming a professional dancer? Like that's a magical thing. There's something.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I'd say 90% of it was just force of will and ignorance. Like my parents didn't know anything about ballet. No one did where I grew up. I had this one little ballet teacher with a studio over a garage, and fortunately, she had some training. And I remember seeing someone giving me a book, and I don't remember. It wasn't about ballet. It was about like women. It was one of those like successful women in the world, and someone had given me that as a child. And I remember Maria Tallchief was on there, and she was one of the pictures, and she said she was half Native American, and she grew up in the middle of nowhere, and she became a prima ballerina, America's first prima ballerina. So I remember seeing that and being like, oh, cool. Well, then I can do that. That's me. I'm half Native American. I'm in the middle of nowhere, so I can be a dancer too. And so it was just always something that was, and none of us knew any different. My parents, I talk to them now, and I'm like, why did you think this was possible? And they're like, well, we didn't know. We didn't know any different. We knew nothing about ballet. And so,
that's so wonderful.
Yeah. So they're just like, okay, do it.
Don't let your preconceptions stop you from doing things.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, it's a very expensive career. So I had an aunt that became my patron. She was the first female chemist at 3M in Minnesota, and she was not married and didn't have kids, and so she was my patron. And I did ballet because of her. She always wanted to dance, but grew up somewhere where they didn't have anything like ballet, and so she paid for it for me, and was my biggest supporter all the way through. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm lucky.
When you say I was a professional ballet dancer for 10 years, I have ideas of what that really means, but I mean, does this mean you're touring around the country, around the world? Like, what does that look like?
Well, I started at my first job was at Atlanta Ballet in Atlanta, Georgia, but then I got married, and so my husband was from here, and I decided to. I mean, the plan was I was going to stay in Atlanta, and then we're going to get married eventually, and then move to LA, or he'd move there or whatever. And, I was young and excited. And so I moved to LA. I left Atlanta after the first season and moved to LA. And then I was fortunate. I kept getting hired by the various ballet companies in LA, but at that time, now LA has a ballet company, but at that time they didn't, and they were just coming and going and coming and going. So I ended up doing, I danced with the company for a year and then be gone, or danced half a year and then be gone, or, And so I had to just constantly put together work from a bunch of companies. But then I also had a couple partners I worked with, and we did balancing ballets, and we worked with different companies around the country that would bring us in to do guestings of different balancing ballets for them.
What is that?
George Balanchine, so his ballets are all controlled by a trust, and if you want, you have to get permission from the Balanchine Trust in New York if you want to do any of his ballets, and he's the greatest neoclassical composer in our country, or in the world probably, but yeah, okay. Anyway, we won't debate about that now. I'm debating with myself here because you're not going to
We'll let the internet argue about that one.
Yeah. So anyway, he so his trust controls who can do his ballets. So if you want to do a particular ballet, you have to apply to the trust, and they look at your dancers and determine. And sometimes they'll say, okay, your dancers can do the corps de ballet, but you have to bring in a couple to do the solo roles or whatever, and so then that would be us, and so we'd go in and do that. So, yay, which is crazy, and I was really fortunate. I mean, I shouldn't have. Again, it's a lot of ignorance. I shouldn't have been hired as much as I was. I had so many physical problems that continued through my career. My lines were never right. I got kicked out of one ballet school because I was too big to ever be a dancer. They measured my bones, and my bones were too large. Therefore, I could never lose enough weight to look like a dancer. And so they
measured your bones?
Yeah, it's insane. They make you go through this whole long physical craziness and put you in a tank of water and for your body mass index and density and all that. Yeah, it's insane. So, yeah,
that's a process where can they just be like, You're 5'10". That's how big your bones are.
No, it's a whole you can never. I was told I could never have a body that would facilitate a career in ballet. A year later, I got hired by Atlanta Ballet, so meh. But
in their face.
I know. But so I had, but I was, and in my time, I was tall at 5'7". At that time, was very tall. Kids are much taller now, but it was still unusually tall, and so. I just had a lot of things going against me, and I just stupidly kept doing it. I have, thanks to my parents, I understand music incredibly well. So my musicality was very, very strong, and my understanding of music. I can read music. I can interpret music in a way that a lot of dancers unfortunately couldn't. That were much better. 90% of the people I danced with were better than me, but I also had a performance quality that So whatever that is, I did have that, and I know how to control an audience.
And you were aware of that when you were a performer?
Yeah, always. Yeah. I know I can walk on stage and control an audience with one finger.
What's funny is that's my first experience. First time I met you, you hadn't met me, but it was at the TCG conference in Los Angeles in 2011, and you were such a rock star. You gave a keynote. You gave a keynote, and I was like, she's a rock star. And you were kind of treated that way. And you sort of you weren't behaving like a diva rock star, that kind of thing. But you commanded the audience in your speech that day. And,
that was kind of my coming out for theater.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was my national coming out party.
Well, that's interesting. Not a lot of people get that kind of national stage at the preeminent theater conference in America.
Yeah.
How did you get to that?
I actually they had an open application that year for people to submit talks, and so I submitted, and they chose mine, and they put me. I know Teresa Eyring from the head of TCG. Mm-hmm. She was the whatever she was called. It's not executive director, I think, of Children's Theater Company of Minneapolis, which was where my first play was commissioned and performed. And so I knew her from there. So we'd been friends, and she, I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but she positioned me really, really well. Around next to Todd London, so it was,
right.
I had to go after Todd London, which is horrifying. It was I don't know if you remember, but it was a 10-minute standing ovation.
Oh, I remember.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm toast.
But you weren't.
Yeah, but the room was packed, so I was like, well, at least everybody's here, so that was good. But so she gave me a really nice position there, which was great.
So we have this gap here. We have this gap from... You dance professionally, which we completely Reader's Digest version.
Yes.
Your 10 years, your decade-long career as a dancer. Injuries bringing it to an end.
Yeah.
And then there's this gap between that point and your coming out party at TCG 2011.
Yeah, it's like a 5-6 year gap there.
So what was the sort of impetus to transition from dancing to writing?
You know what? So because I landed in LA, like everybody, I thought, oh, well, actually first I assumed as a ballet dancer, generally you move on to musical theater or you teach or you choreograph. And I was really fortunate at the end of my career. I got a gig as a principal dancer in a musical, a horrible, horrible musical, but it was a really good experience in Europe. So I got to try the musical theater thing. I was like, wow, I can't do this. It was, huge props to people that do musical theater. I don't know how they do it. I was a lead character, and I still just couldn't. I just hated myself every day because you're doing the same show 450 times, and I was used to doing, maybe you get 3 weeks, maybe a month of one show, and then you move on to something else. And
so it was the repetition of it that drove you
artistically,
crazy?
I just hated myself. I don't know how people do it. I don't have that kind of personality that can do the same thing. I always need a new challenge, and doing the same thing over and over again 450 times in 1 year, it was horrible. It was torture. So I realized, okay, well, I'm not going to do musical theater. Just the year before that, a friend of mine, actually one of my ballet partners, he'd moved back to New York, so he gave me all of his teaching gigs, which were quite a few. So I was doing teaching full time. It's like, wow, no, I'm way too selfish to teach. I'm way too selfish at this time. I still have stuff I want to do, And then Choreography I've done. I've actually continued to do choreography, but wasn't something I ever felt like pursuing full time. I just didn't work. So I thought, well, I'm in LA. I'll act, of course, because that's what everyone does. And then I realized just the whole coming from ballet, which is, especially as a Balanchine trained dancer, it's all about the art form. It's never about yourself. You never. There's no large bows. There's no. You always bow in a group. It's very like socialist sort of. Everyone is equal. There's no stars. And then so to be in LA, where all of a sudden you have to be pushing yourself and promoting yourself and going to these the parties where everyone's looking over your shoulder while they're talking to you,
right.
and like I couldn't do it. I just couldn't stomach what actors have to go through. I mean, they have to do it to get attention and to get seen and to stay in people's radar. And it's an incredibly difficult thing. And I just didn't have the whatever it is that lets people do that. I just couldn't. So in that time, I would, because I wasn't a theater person before that, I wrote all my own auditions. I just write them before I went. And so in that process, I started writing in script form. And I'd always read and written all my life, but never in script. And so I started writing in script form, and it just it made sense.
What were you writing like growing up? Like journal?
Yeah, stories, poems, journals, whatever. My parents are very I don't know, they're very kind of academically minded. We'd go like on vacation, we'd go to the Black Hills and stay in a cabin, and we'd take my dog and we'd go hike out into the woods and get on top of a rock, and we'd sit on a rock out in the woods and read and write all day. Like that's what we would do for vacation together, and just hang out reading and writing, but in nature, as opposed to when we were always doing it at home. I always had paper and pen on me at the time. I just never went anywhere, but it never took any long form. It's just what you do. You just write everything down. And so that's where so when I started with script, I was like, oh, this is something like I can do, because I hadn't, I wasn't in college. I'd gone into ballet and been in ballet instead. I was working, so I didn't go to college, and I felt like that was some, dialogue is something I didn't feel intimidated by. It's just, I can talk. So
right.
If you can talk, you can write dialogue. And so that's where I started with that. And then I was kind of flirting around the Indigenous film community here. And I was invited to speak. This sounds insane, but I was invited to speak at the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. And I know, it's so stupid. It's like, I swear I'm not making this up. I swear, I've got pictures. I was there. But so long, crazy story. But I ended up there, and I was talking at the Working Group for Indigenous Populations, which is under the Human Rights Commission. And so I was talking about using film as kind of a positive tool of globalization for Indigenous people, for bringing film programs to Indigenous people to record their own stories before they're already, as soon as you have contact and people are recording them, you're already a step away of interpretation away from what's really happening, And so we're talking about creating film programs for Indigenous populations to be able to record their own culture and their own stories. And in the middle of that, I just suddenly had this, I was just say it's like the Oprah aha moment, where I was like, oh my gosh, I need to do that. Like, I need to start writing the stories, and it's my responsibility. I have to stop talking about this. I have to stop talking about proper representation of Indigenous people and culture. I have to write it down, And so I realized in that moment, I got all teary and I was a mess, and I realized I have to become a writer, and so that was it. And so I started in film and TV. I lied my way into Hollywood, which is the one place you can do that, and they totally respect you for it.
What sort of lies were you telling?
I got my first. I have to make money, right? Because I'm married to an artist, so I can't stop and go to school or whatever. So I heard about a paid internship at Universal Pictures with the executive vice president. Oh, no, that time it was the senior vice president at Universal Pictures. And, just through long whatever, I'd heard about it, but you had to be in school. It had to be, to get the paid internship, you had to be in school
right.
or just completed a program. So I made up this whole program that unfortunately had just closed. And so you can't go there. And it was in Santa Monica because, in LA, Santa Monica is so far away.
Oh, yeah.
No one has ever been there. So I made this whole thing, and my acting teacher was like, I don't even know like college terms. Like one was my dean of students and the other one was my ballet teacher was my academic advisor. Like I don't even know what these things are. Like I just went off like TV shows. And so those were the people I put down, and thank goodness they never called them. I mean, they had their stories ready, but and so that no one called, no one checked. No, they just bought it, and then I got hired to be an intern for the senior vice president at Universal Pictures. And he was fantastic. I fessed up to him right away. I was like, hey, first meeting, I was like, I need to let you know. Like, I just made all this up. I want to be a writer. And fortunately, I met the right guy, Lenny Kornberg. He was amazing. He was started as a writer, and because of life and family and having kids, he ended up staying as an executive. And he'd always regretted not becoming a writer instead. And so he's like, I will not let that happen to you. And he took me under his wing and trained me to be a writer.
A writer for television?
Film and TV, yeah. So and he's a writer now. He made his dream come true finally.
Okay, so you're kind of you're going your career trajectory is like not a trajectory really. You're sort of like scattershot all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's because there is a sort of like traditional trajectory for a lot of writers. Like you grow up, you go to school, you write, you submit to things, perhaps you become a playwright, and perhaps that's your platform to get hired for film and television.
Right.
But you got in, you basically were a ballet dancer, did some acting, and then got into film and television.
Yeah, pretty much. I would say I'm the only like writer in LA that like left film and TV for theater.
Yeah, that's mental.
Yeah, I mean,
it's wonderfully mental.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I was really fortunate. I mean, I ended up moving up in the Hollywood ranks and became a creative executive over at Paramount, at a company at Paramount, and I in just a few years, and in the end, like got a piece into the Sundance Native Film Program, a feature film, and then I sold 2 TV shows to networks. Neither of them made it on the air, but I got 2 set up of my own. And so like all that happened in like seriously like 3.5, 4 years. It was crazy. And then I thought, I mean, in my head, obviously theater was my home. Like I just was never comfortable in the Hollywood world. I was never comfortable in the studio world. These people, I have nothing but respect for them. They give their entire lives over to this machine. I mean, everything, 24/7, literally. I mean, I had, an executive I was working for before I went to Paramount. I mean, we had filming in, we're doing actually Born Identity in Paris. And so, we'd work all day on our 3 films here and then be up all night. As soon as we finished, we'd have time to quick wolf something down, then stay up all night with Paris. And this would go on for months. I mean, these people I have nothing but respect for people in Hollywood and how much work they do.
I was just listening to the West Wing podcast, and Ellie Addy, who was a speechwriter for Gore, and he worked in the Clinton White House. He talked about, and he became a TV writer after that. He ended up writing for the West Wing and several other TV shows. But on this podcast interview, he's talking about how people who work in the White House they sacrifice everything for the time that they're working there. Like there is no personal life. Like you will have to leave your significant other wherever they are if you're called for something even menial. But it's just how it is, and it's just part of the process. And it sounds like that's what you're describing for the people working in this industry, except in the White House, there's a time clock. Like it ends, but this is sort of like an indefinite thing. You have to be wired to just want to work like that.
Yeah, and because there's always, millions and millions of dollars on the line, always, and that never ends. And yes, they make good money, but those people work for their money, know, and it wasn't, and my problem is, I'm not motivated by money. Like money has never been a motivator for me. Like I'm not opposed to money. I mean, I have lots of friends with money, do fantastic things with it and all, but it's just doing something for the money has never occurred to me, and it's not something that interests me. So that just wasn't a comfortable world for me. And I was really fortunate through Sundance then. I had this film in Sundance, and I quit when I got my film into the Sundance Native program. I quit Hollywood and decided I'm just going to work. I felt like I wanted to work on writing full time, and I had the TV show that was getting set up. And Peter Brocious at Children's Theater Company in Minneapolis went to Sundance Native program and said, hey, give us some Native American writers. We've never commissioned a Native American writer in the incredibly long, fantastic history of children's theater company. And I was one of them they commissioned, and I got there. And as I have said on other podcasts, it was dancers with furniture. I was like, oh, I know these people. Like, I get it. Like, this is my world. And,
Larissa, there is no other podcast.
Sorry. There were, but you've obliterated all of them. But at one time,
So say that again.
I said, this is actually Deep Tran is who I told this to. I said, I saw these guys. I got into the rehearsal hall, and with actors, I went, oh, they're dancers with furniture. I can do this, And I just understood everything about it. Like, I know this world. I know how to control an audience. I know how to, not control, that sounds horrible, but, but I do. I know how to take them on the journey I want to take them on. I just had to translate that onto the page. And for that, I had amazing mentors in the theater world that really showed me how to take what I know how to do as a performer and what I had learned how to do as far as a filmmaker and someone who could produce, and how to take those two things and then find the playwright in the middle and translate it all into the page. And so here I am, 10 years later.
So you wrote that first play. You were commissioned for that first play, and then how did that trigger the? Like, what happened after that? Like, how did you sort of maintain a life in the theater? After this beginning.
Well, which again is insane. I must say, I don't recommend like your first ever play being a Lord A theater company. Like, I really don't recommend it. It almost killed me. I mean, just the stress and I'd never written a play, and the stress and the pressure of it. And they're, it's funny because people, that don't know think, oh, it's children's theater. It's like, no, they're a Lord A and they're Tony Award winning and they send shows to Broadway. I mean, it's amazing theater company, and the production value is better than many Broadway shows I've seen. It's just an incredible machine of artistry. And so the pressure was unbelievable. I mean, I that's the second hardest thing I've done in my life after urban res, I'd say. And I had so much doubts because I thought you could be a playwright unless you had a degree. I thought you had to have a master's degree to be a playwright. And I had no degree of any kind. So I had just a lot of insecurity about myself, and I felt like playwriting was this literary world that I still struggle with that, and feeling like I'm less than and I don't understand, and everyone has these secrets that they got that I never got. And I don't know. Yeah. So it was just, I had a lot of that going on. Like, I'm just some hack TV film writer that made up a writing program.
Mm-hmm.
I've never even taken a creative writing class. Like, I tried to in college, but they wouldn't let me because they said I was sick and I had the flu, and I took the placement class, and so they made me take like remedial writing. It was ridiculous. I mean, I was writing letters, like business letters and resumes, and the TA was like, obviously you're in the wrong class, so if you'll just be like my TA to the TA, like
right.
You just have an A, and if you'll just help me out, that'd be great. And so I've never gotten to even taken a creative writing class in my life. Like, I just don't even know what they do.
But do you feel like you're suffering for a lack of something?
It's all in my head.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, because I have a career as a playwright. This is what I do. I don't work another job.
Right. There are plenty of us, myself included, who have gone through a master's program. I have an MFA, and I don't have a playwriting career. I have plenty of plays, but I don't have a playwriting career. So.
Yeah,
it's
something's working.
It's not the most important. It's not the most important thing in the world to get to get a degree.
And I think I'm finally, like, in the past year, I'm finally getting over that. But I don't know. I just always had this this insecurity that everyone knows something that I don't.
Yeah.
And I will say there is something in that I'm just kind of, I don't know if I'm figuring out or the world's figuring out me, because I know how to work an audience, right? And I know how to take them on the journey I want them to go on. And so, like, audiences love my plays. Critics don't love my plays generally. Literary people, like, I have to find my niche. Like, I'm not someone who is universally loved by far, like my work, a lot of people read it and they're like, oh, it's so simple. It's so whatever. And I was like, it's deceptively simple. Yes. But an audience I'm like, if you could see the audience, like, the audience got it. The audience was crying. The audience was on their feet. The audience, but when you read it on the page, it doesn't come across in some way that I don't know, I guess trained playwrights do. I don't know what that is, which is fine. I mean, that's not who I'm trying to please audiences. I really don't care what everyone else
thinks.
We
all are, and I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody knows what they're doing.
Like, I don't win, like, I don't even enter, like, big submission things because I never get anywhere. I never even get close. It's so funny because I'll have people, like, one of the big ones that we all submit to recently, like, the director is like, hey, Larissa, why aren't you submitting? I'm like, well, actually, I've submitted like everything I own, and I've never even made it to like, the finals or even close to it. I've always been eliminated in the first round. They're like, oh, huh. I'm like, thanks for rubbing that in. I appreciate it. But my plays don't usually do well on that sort of thing. But I've found kind of through the years now my niche of people that get what I do.
And that's amazing. I think that's a journey that I'm on. Like I'm constantly searching for my people, who understand what I'm trying to do, because perhaps it is niche as well, and we just have to find the people that respond to it. Yeah. And I think that's what everybody's doing. And some people write things that are just more broadly appealing or more broadly obvious, and not better or worse. It just is what it is.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think, that honestly definitely comes from my ballet career, because I knew with all my physical problems, I wasn't right for tons of people. And I knew that. Like I'm the person that, you hear about these horrible auditions, and they're true, where you walk into the room and they cut me before I did anything, and so like that was me. So I know, but yet I worked. And I had a career, and I worked for 10 years, professionally. And so I know that you just have to find your way in. You have to find your people. And I knew that going in. So I think that was a big advantage for me, because I've never expected everybody to love me or love my work or get my work. That's fine. It's totally cool. I know my work works on an audience, and that's who I care about.
So earlier you were talking about how you had this, I'll call it an epiphany, but you had this moment where you were like, I need to write these stories. I need to take that responsibility. Do you feel that responsibility in everything you write? Do you find yourself constantly writing about Indigenous people?
Well, I've also been super fortunate that thus far, until now, where everything's suddenly slowed down a lot, I had a lot of commissions early on. So when people are commissioning me, they are interested in generally the Indigenous stories of their region. So that's what a lot of my early work was being commissioned specifically for that reason, because they want to talk about Indigenous stories, generally the people around them that they've just never acknowledged. And so that was part of the gig, which I love. I love being able to do that. I mean, how cool is that? I get to go to different areas and learn about the Indigenous people of that area and get to know them and write about them. And that's pretty amazing. It's quite an honor to do that. Unfortunately, that means a lot of my work can't be like redone very often. I mean, I can, but people don't. Casting is the number one issue with my work. People are terrified of having to cast an Indian. So so it's something that I've been a privilege to do. I would love to do an entire career just doing that, but the truth is my work won't get out there as much as I would like it to. So like my newest play is 4 white people trying to devise a politically correct play about Thanksgiving and for Native American Heritage Month. So that's my newest play, and that's how I'm dealing with it. Is this
a commission?
No, this is the one I wrote. I wrote it last year I got the Joe Dowling Fellowship to go to Ireland and write a play from Joe Hodge. And so that's what I wrote. And theater companies picked it up. So they'll be produced next year.
Is that announced yet? Can you say?
It's not announced.
It's not announced yet.
Yeah.
So you wrote this in Ireland.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Did your presence in Ireland, your experience in Ireland, bleed into what sounds like a very, very American idea?
It's interesting because it's my second time to Ireland, but the first time I got to sit, like I was in a residency with a bunch of artists, and who speak their own language, and are several of them are connected to their original tribal people in Ireland. They're Gaelic people, and Gaelic is another problem word that not everyone agrees with, so I apologize for saying that now. But there's anyway, they speak their original languages and are connected to their tribal peoples, and we found out there's just so much that's similar and so much that in a pan-Irish tribal way connected to the pan-Native American way, you know what I mean? And there were so many crossovers and so many things spiritually in the way they lived, and when you live close to the land, there's things that are always going to be, the land's the same everywhere, so there's things that are going to be so similar. So I actually found a lot of similarity and inspiration that way in this play. I will say it was hard because I was also rewriting Urban Res at the time. I'm doing a massive rewrite on that, and because my brain is just trying to I'm terrible at accents and I have a bad ear for that. So your brain is trying to sort it out. So in my head, everyone was speaking with an Irish accent, which was really not helpful at all. And brilliant kept slipping in, and I don't say brilliant, so stuff like that I had to be really aware of, definitely. But mostly I just shut myself in my little room and only saw people at dinner, which everyone's required to go to dinner at this place. But otherwise I didn't talk to any people. Yeah.
And so when does that premiere?
We don't have a date set yet. It's next fall. I think it's going to be their fall slot of 17 for that one.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll see that announcement soon.
Yes.
And what else are you working on, if anything?
Yeah.
You just closed.
Yeah, we just closed
this
Urban Res
massive marathon,
Sunday, which was insanity. I haven't no one reads my stuff in LA. They don't even read it. No one even wants to read my stuff in LA. So it's weird because I haven't had a play in LA in 9 years. I didn't realize how tiring it is to have a play in your hometown. It's exhausting. Because everyone wants to see you, and thank goodness they don't do talkbacks. But I just had to it's like having a party every night, and I have a lot of social anxiety. I'm very much, so I had to put on my playwright character, the one that you saw at TCG in 2011. I have to put on that character and go be a host every night, and that's really exhausting. I was it wore me out.
I know. I was there the night of your birthday.
Yes, yeah, that was the ultimate over the top hostess craziness, which was loads of fun though. I'm glad you came. It was a really special night. But now, so that just closed. I've got 3 days off, and I'm going to, I started another crazy trip. I'm going up to San Luis Obispo on Thursday and doing a class speech and then a campus speech about decolonizing narratives and urban res and What Would Crazy Horse Do, which is more popular plays. And then I'm going from there to Santa Clara University. On Friday, they're opening their workshop production of What Would Crazy Horse Do at the university. And I'm doing talkbacks the first 3 days. And then I go to Kansas City Rep. It's all What Would Crazy Horse Do. And then we're doing our workshop of What Would Crazy Horse Do for their Origins Festival, which is their first new play festival. And that's in preparation for them producing it next year. And then where do I go? Then I go to the TCG board. I'm on the board of directors at TCG, so I go to the board meeting there. And then I go up to Artist Rep in Portland to work on a play up there. Hint, hint.
Oh, I'm a big fan of Artist Rep.
Yeah, so we're working at Damaso and Luann up there. And then I go, where am I going? Then I go to Minneapolis for another workshop of What Would Crazy Horse Do. It's the big play right now. And then I go somewhere else.
That's kind of wonderful to be able to ride a play around the country.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's very weird. And, Kansas City Rep jumped on first to produce it. I mean, it's been a couple of years since it's been on the Lilly, not the Lilly Awards. We did reading at the Lilly Awards since it's been on the Kilroy's list. It's finally getting produced next year.
Kilroy's success story.
Yeah, yay. So then TCG conference in DC, and then I'm done. And I'm going to write a new play. Thank goodness.
How about a vacation?
Yeah, I'm going to do that too. I'm taking a week off. I've been just waiting. I've been in continuous rehearsal since the first week of December.
Oh, wow.
Which is not good for playwrights. We're not meant to be around people every day for months on end.
No, you need to go back to Ireland and shut yourself in a cabin with some green hill somewhere, some sheep.
It's true. I mean, I think I've had a week off of rehearsal in that whole time. It's just been craziness, which is fantastic. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying I'm really not socially built for that.
Yeah.
It's just not how I usually operate. So yeah, I'm going to take a week off in June, and then we'll see where I'm going next. Got a few things set up for the fall.
Well, thank you for reserving an hour of time to come out to the East Side and talk to me.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I always like talking to you.
Yeah, I love talking to you too.
Thanks.
Fun. Thanks.
I never get sick of talking to Larissa. Thank you for being here, Larissa. You can find her online at hoganhorsestudio.com, a website she shares with her artist husband, Ed Hogan. Welcome to the end of the episode, where I say more thank yous and leave you with a teaser for next month's episode. So here we go. Thank you to Bill Bordy for funding At This Stage magazine. Thank you to LA Stage Alliance for hiring Danny Oliver. Thank you to Danny Oliver for hiring me and running thisstage.la. Go check out the awesome work on that site. Thank you to David at JTB Recording Studio for recording our podcast. Thank you for listening and following us on Twitter at Subtext Podcast. Thank you for emailing us at thesubtextpodcast@gmail.com. And thank you for listening through the end of the episode. Tune in next week to hear my didgeridoo cover of the song Aquarius from the musical Hair.